I want to teach you guys to do is how to fight for your marriage, not in your marriage. All too often, men are fighting in their marriage, but not for it. So if this is getting heated, I remove myself from the situation. That's the manly thing to do. That's what I thought. My wife told me that that was worse than physical abuse to her. It was emotional abuse to her. And I've heard this from countless women since. And so maybe we'll be upset with each other for an hour, but it doesn't go longer than that because we've put these things I'm going to teach you guys into place. Hey guys, welcome back to the TPM Show. Today I want to talk about conflict in marriage, right? Love is a battlefield. Conflict is inevitable in a marriage, right? But what I want to teach you guys to do is how to fight for your marriage, not in your marriage, right? All too often, men are fighting in their marriage, but not for it. And so I want you to be that difference maker into your world, into your wife's world, really doing it. Look, my wife and I still argue. There's no secret about it. We still argue. But when things were at their worst, an argument over taking out the trash or an argument over the dishes or something could create disconnect between her and I for weeks, right? We'd be argued, we'd be distant, we'd shut down. There'd be no intimacy. Now, fast forward to today, we get in an argument, we argue, we resolve it in seconds, and the worst, minutes. You know, sometimes my teenager comes out and I don't want to resolve it. And so maybe we'll be upset with each other for an hour, but it doesn't go longer than that because we've put these things I'm going to teach you guys into place. Now, at TPM, we teach the triadic connection. I don't have time to go over that whole thing, but you can look back through previous podcasts if that's something that you're interested in. That is the best way to do a deep dive into this type of content. It's the activation method where a man becomes reactivated. If you're interested in that program, go to thepowerfulman.com// apply now, right? That's thepowerfulman.com// apply now. It's a whole program that goes over how to do some of this stuff. But I'm going to give you some takeaways. And for you guys that have been through the program, this is going to be some refreshers, maybe a few new things. But oftentimes when we learn something, we need to hear from a different angle. So hopefully this will help you guys as well. So when we think about, conflict, right? Really what's happening here oftentimes when there is a conflict, it's when expectations aren't being met, right? So there's two main things that happen. One is miscommunication, right? Something's said and it's interpreted in a way it shouldn't be. Another one is expectations aren't met or they're mismatched expectations. You're expecting to have sex. She's expecting to do the dishes. Mismatched expectation, right? Or, you don't communicate that you're staying late at work. She's pissed at you. Now you guys are arguing and you start fighting about different things. Oftentimes couples also do what I call stacking. They stack little disagreements, right? Your wife might upset you about something. Let's just say she doesn't tell you about a birthday party that she's going to with girlfriends. I'm making this up on the fly, guys. And you let it go. And then a week later, something else happens. And a week later, something else happens. And finally, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. And you start stacking all of these conflicts, if you will, or things that resentments is really what they are. You stack these resentments, and then you blow up. And you blow up over something like she left a wrapper in your truck, right? And you get all upset about the wrapper. How dare she leave trash in the truck? Da, 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 da. It's not about the trash. It's not about the wrapper, right? It's about all these other things you've stacked. And you start saying, oh, and then 2 weeks ago you went out with the girls you didn't tell me. And then you did this, right? You're starting to stack these things, again, resentments up. And that creates a wider conflict. So we want to nail them one at a time. We want to go after them head on. And the way we do this is a way that we call the hidden motives technique. So the hidden motives technique is part of the triadic connection. And real briefly, it's really about validation and empathy combined. It's a way that a man can allow his wife to feel seen and heard at a deep, deep level. And when you get this, she'll feel seen and heard at such a deep level that she starts thinking, wow, he really gets me. This is a man like I've always wanted or always imagined. We often hear from men that their wives will say, I feel seen and heard for the first time in my life. Imagine that. Imagine being the guy in her world that allows her to feel seen and heard, which then leads to desire. For men, we often feel more connected after sex, right? At least I do. I start to feel that connection after intimacy. For my wife, she needs the connection to want to be intimate. Not all the time, right? Both of them not all the time, but a large portion of the time. So if I can make my wife feel connected often, right, she's going to want to be intimate often. That's a good formula, guys. Now you have passion in the marriage, and she's getting her needs met. I'm getting my needs met. The kids are in a harmonious environment. Do we still argue? Yep, we sure do. If you ever meet me, I can be argumentative. I'm headstrong. And we get past those arguments really quick. So the hidden motives technique looks like something like this. Let's just say my wife is upset because I went out with the guys to grab a beer, and I ended up staying out 3 hours later than she thought I would be. Now, in this scenario that I'm setting the scenario very deliberately. I just said, hey, I'm going to go out with the guys, get a couple beers. She says, cool, no problem. I go out, but in her mind, she's expecting I'll be back at 8, and I come home at 11. Let's just, for hypothetical speak. She gets upset. Oh, you're out to all hours drinking and carousing. I don't even know what you're doing out there. So she's getting upset. Now, I don't want to apologize because I did nothing wrong in this case, in my opinion. So what I would do is say something to her, right? Instead of just arguing, like a typical guy would say, let me go backtrack. The old Doug would have said, well, I'm just going out with the guys. I can be able to do what I want. I'm a grown man. And then she comes back and yells, yeah, you're a grown man. I don't know what you're doing out there. You're always out doing your own thing, leaving me with the kids. Then I would come back with something like, well, I work my ass off all day. You know, I should at least be able to go out with the guys. And she's hurt. She starts crying. She goes in the room, slams the door. I go into the kitchen. I'm pissed off. We sleep in separate rooms. You get the scenario, right? I've been through it 100 times, and I'm sure you have. Something similar. Now, what I would do now, right? So same scenario. Hey, babe, I'm going to go drink a couple drinks with the guys. She's like, great. I go out. In her mind, she's thinking Doug's coming home at 8. He'll be able to help put down the kids, but it's never communicated, right? Remember I said unmet expectations and miscommunication are the two biggest parts that arguments start, typically speaking. So she's expecting me at 8. We don't talk. I'm having a great time with the guys. I come home at 11, and she does the same thing, right? Because her expectation was 8. So she comes home, and I come home, and she says something to the effect of, oh, you're out all night with the guys. I don't know what you're up to. I'm with the kids alone. And again, I don't have to apologize. I don't have to say, oh, I'm so sorry, babe. I should have called you. Oh, it's my bad. That doesn't resolve the conflict, right? Not in a manly way anyway. So what I would say in this case, because I'm not sorry. I didn't do anything wrong, so I'm not going to apologize. However, I, as the man, as her man, and the person that loves her, wants to protect her and provide for her, I never want her to feel that way. I don't want her to feel hurt. I don't want her to feel scared, not knowing where I am or what's going on. No, that's not my objective, right? My objective, I want my wife to feel light, free, sexy, happy. I want her to feel all those great emotions, right? Don't you? So what I might say there in that situation is like, oh, babe, I never want you to feel scared and not know where I am. What I want is for both of us to always feel like we're on the same page and that we could go out and have fun with our friends and feel good about it, right? So again, what I'm doing is I'm validating her feelings, scared or whatever else it might be, and I'm telling her what I want. I'm leading her. What I want is this. Now, in this scenario, I might also ask for collaboration. How do you think we can do it in such a manner that we can go out and feel and have fun with our friends while the other person can also feel good about being home alone or being home with the kids? Now we get into collaboration together, right? I'm starting to lead that collaboration. Most likely my wife is going to let her take down her swords and let her walls down, right? She's going to put down her weapons. And instead of fighting, she's going to be in collaboration, correct? Because I've acknowledged her feelings. I've told her I never want her to feel that way. Never apologized for being home later. Never did. I said, hey, I never want you to feel that way, babe. I'm sorry you're feeling this way. Because I would be sorry that she's feeling that way. I'm not sorry for my actions. Again, it's a big distinction, guys. And then I'm going to lead her to what I want is the vision. Here's the vision of what I want. I want us to both be able to go out with our friends, which is true, and while the other person still feels good at home. How can we do this? And she might say, well, it'd be nice to know when you're coming home, or it'd be nice to know that you check in. I'm like, okay. And then I would think to myself, is that reasonable? And if it is, I go, yeah. What we could do is, why don't we just set a kind of a fluid check-in time where it's after, 2, 3 hours, we know when that person is supposed to be home. And if they want to stay out later, they check in to make sure everything's good at home. And she might say, yeah, let's do that. Now we're planning together. So I'm turning this argument that would have, again, lasted probably 2 weeks with my wife and I when we were going through our roughest spots till I learned this technique. Now I'm turning that into connection. Remember what I said? When women feel really connected, they feel safe. When they feel safe, that's when they allow that connection and that desire to come in. And if you're also adding in she's feeling safe, she's feeling seen and heard. And if you add desire in there, and that's up to you to do, but if you add the element of desire into that, it's very likely that intimacy is a possibility. Maybe not that night. If you come home at 11, she may decide, no, not tonight, but tomorrow. Let's plan it. Right? So you need to have that hidden motive technique, that empathy in there. There's often that saying, first seek to understand, then to be understood. Right? So again, I'm going to listen to her. I'm going to understand what is it about me coming home at 11 that was really the problem. And you can kind of guess a lot of times what it is. I want to get to the feeling. I want to put myself in her shoes. If I thought my wife was coming home at 8 and she comes home at 11 after being out with her girlfriends, what's the fear here? Am I scared of her safety? Am I worried she's going to cheat? Or am I just frustrated that I'm home alone and bored, or frustrated with the kids? I want to get into her shoes as quickly as possible, and then I can empathize, right? Then I can go to that second step of empathy. Now, another thing my wife and I have done is we have a communication plan. Sounds super unsexy, and it is, except for the fact that it works. So we have agreements and boundaries around communication, around arguments in particular, right? And just like the example I gave you, in that example, me and my wife hypothetically came up with a communication plan. What was that? Right? If you go back, I said, how could we do this? And she said, well, we could set an expected time for each other to come home. And if we're going to stay out later, we just check in. That's a communication plan, right? You're coming up with an agreement and setting boundaries or rules of engagement, if you will. And you want to do this. Another thing we have with my wife and I have is sometimes I don't want to talk about something. She might bring it up. I'm like, no, this is not the time. Or I get too heated, or she gets too heated. We don't allow ourselves to walk away from an argument without setting a time that we're going to come back and revisit the conversation. So what I mean by that is, if I get too heated, I'm like, look, I need some space. I need to go for a walk. I could say that, but I need to also say, I need to go for a walk. We'll talk about this tomorrow, or we'll talk about this tonight, or we can talk about this weekend. I'm closing the loop for her, and she needs to do the same for me, of when we get to have this conversation, because it's clearly an important one if it's heated. It's a conversation that needs to happen, but you have to close that loop. You can't just stonewall. Stonewalling is closing down internally. I was a professional at that, right? Just shutting down. Because I thought, honestly, I was being more manly by shutting my emotions off, because I wasn't yelling at her. I wasn't leaving. These are things I did in previous relationships. I'd just leave. If it got too heated, like, look, I'm never hit a woman. So if this is getting heated, I remove myself from the situation. That's the manly thing to do. That's what I thought. My wife told me that was worse than physical abuse to her. It was emotional abuse to her. And I've heard this from countless women since. So if I decide to walk away now, what I say is, look, I need to go for a walk. I'm getting a little too steamed here. We can talk about this in 2 hours, right? Does that work for you? Again, I have to get confirmation. She could say, no, it doesn't, but she can't tell me I can't leave. So she said, no, 2 hours doesn't work for me, but we can do it in 3, right? So it has to be a later date than I set, right? So 2 hours is my minimum, the soonest I'd come back. She can say, no, 2 hours doesn't work because maybe she's got an appointment or something else is going on, or maybe she needs more space. But we agree upon a time, even though we're pissed at each other, we agree upon a time when we're going to come back. And again, using the triadic connection, my wife and I almost never do this. I can't even think of a time when we've had to use this in recent memory because I use the triadic connection so frequently with her. So connection's always there. We still argue, but it never gets to the point we have to walk away. Literally, arguments end like that most of the time. Again, sometimes they can take minutes, right? Or if I'm being stubborn, I might just take an hour, but it's very rare. So have a communication plan and then sit down with your wife, go out to dinner, do one of your date nights and talk about it. Say, babe, you know what? I don't want to be one of those couples that argues all the time. Do you? She's going to say no, right? Who does? Like, let's come up with a communication plan. So when arguments happen, and they're inevitable, what can we do together? How can we communicate together? Right? That's an adult thing to do, isn't it? In business, I would do that. You would do it. So do it with your wife. Come up with a communication plan to do that. The third thing, right? The third thing I want you to do is establish regular check-ins. So this is something I did when my marriage was at the brink of collapsing at one point, is we started establishing connections. And it was really interesting. It was really interesting in two ways. One is oftentimes I was surprised at my wife's answer. The second thing is sometimes I thought it was used as a power trip. And I'll explain. So I might say to my wife, what I used all the time was, hey, babe, just want to check in. What level is your love tank at? 1 to 10, 10 being the most, right? And she might say a 7. I'm like, okay. And first, obviously, I have a number in my mind of what I think hers is, right? So she might say a 7. She might say a 2. She might say a 10, whatever it is that she says. Now, if she says anything below an 8, what I'll typically respond with, so she says, mine's a 7 right now. I'm like, oh, what's the one thing I can do to help bring your love tank from a 7 to an 8, right? And then she'll tell me, ideally. Maybe it's leave, right? But she'll tell me what it is. And then I can choose whether I want to do it. But I'm checking in. So I know my wife's at a 7, which is a 70%. It's a C, right? I'm not a C student. I'm not here for average, right? I'm here for excellence. So what is it like? And she'll tell me, and then I can ask her a point. Then ideally she asks me, right? Now I might say, a 3 or whatever. If she's at a 7 and I'm at a 3, we got a problem. There's a huge gap there, right? We need to figure out what that is. Now, sometimes I'll flip that around. If she says she's at a 3 and I say I'm at an 8, there's a huge gap, but her love tank could be empty because of something else, right? Tragedy in the family or something. She's just not feeling like that bank account, that emotional bank account. She's feeling it's withdrawn. For some of you guys, your wife might say it's a -10, right? Because you've taken too much out of that bank and you haven't put the deposits in. You need to put deposits in on a daily basis, and communication's the number one way to do it, learning the style. And it's a methodology, guys. This is a proven methodology that works for men to be able to communicate to women, right? It's a methodology, so it works every time when done right. So what we want to do is figure that number out. Now, I did say, you're like, Doug, you said there was a power struggle. I've noticed when I first did this with my wife, my theory was that sometimes I'd ask her and she'd go, well, you go first. And she'd be waiting to hear what I say so she could drop a bomb. So if I say, mine's a 6, and that would shock her, I'd see the look of shock on her face because she thought it would be higher. She might go, well, mine's a 3, and it started to be like this competitive thing. Like I'm worse than you. Like you're doing a worse job as a husband or as a partner than I am. And so we got over that pretty quickly, but I still followed the same thing. So she's like, oh, 3, really? You were just singing love songs earlier. So what can I do to bring it from a 3 to a 4? And it's simple. Then I do that. If I laugh at it, I'd be light rather than taking offense to her number. I can still play that game, right? I can still play with her. But these regular check-ins are important. I know a lot of couples, we teach guys to do, once a week, do a relationship check-in. There's a lot of questions we give our men that can go through it. It's almost like a meeting, right? A relationship meeting. I prefer this question more personally. It's quick, it's easy. Hey, babe, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at today? Like, I don't even have to say love tank to my wife anymore because we've done it for so long. And she might go, I'm a 9 right now. I'd be like, and I'll just respond, that's awesome. I love that you're a 9. What can we do to make you a 10, sexy? I might say something fun and light. And a lot of times my wife will go, you just did, just by asking me, you raised it because you show that you care, right? That's all it is. She just wanted to know that I cared. But sometimes my wife's down, right? And she might say a 5. And again, guys, what I'll respond with is, how can I help you go from a 5 to a 6? And if we're fighting, it's hard, right? Because right now she's thinking, nothing you can do, you jerk, right? She might be thinking that in her head. But we've done this so consistently, right? We know it works in our marriage that she's going to give me an answer. And she could say, you need to apologize for something. Now, if I didn't feel like, again, going back to the validation, right, hidden motives technique, if I didn't feel what I did was wrong, I will apologize for how what I did landed on her because that wasn't my intent, which is true. You're not usually trying to make your wife cry. You're not actively trying to make her cry. You're not actively trying to piss your wife off. You're not actively trying to hurt her. But it happens out of our actions or our words, right? Most of the time. Sometimes some of us can be jerks at times, right? We all can be jerks at times if we want to be. But you get what I'm saying. You don't actively try it. So you can apologize for the way what you did landed on that person, right? You can apologize for that aspect of it and still maintain your dignity, still maintain your authenticity, and they'll feel better. Like, okay, they realize the impact of their actions. They realize that coming home late made me scared or made me feel less than. Now I feel seen and heard. And then you can move forward and lead them to the promised land. So that's it, gentlemen. So I want to give you those three things, right? One is you're going to use the hidden motives technique. Two is you're going to have your regular check-ins, right? You're regularly going to check in with your wife and what her status is. And three, you're going to put a plan together of how you're going to communicate, especially with conflict, right? You don't really have to put a plan together of how to communicate when things are good, but it's when conflict happens. What are your rules of engagement? Because you're going to fight, right? Love is a battlefield, right, as the song goes, and conflicts happen. So use those three things, and I can almost guarantee you that conflicts, although they'll still happen, they will lessen. And if you practice the skills that we teach at TPM, my guess is like most of the men, eventually when you've mastered the skills, these conflicts turn into intimacy. And that is a fun place for you to be. It's a fun place for your wife to be. And it's a great energy for your family to be. So as I always say, in the moment of insight, take massive action. And we'll see you next time on the TPM Show.